A team in its first year in the Big Ten battles a team that hasn't made it to Indianapolis since 2016. An Oregon Ducks team that has marched or waddled its way to a 12-0 regular season takes on a Penn State squad that was a goal line blunder away from potentially being 12-0 themselves. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Penn State Sports Night. I'm Josh Bartosik, joined alongside Cailey, Thalman, and Justin Ciavolella to break down the Big Ten championship game. Justin, let's start with the team that I think a lot of people expected to be here, the Oregon Ducks. What makes them so dominant and the team to be in the Big Ten this year?
Well, anytime you've got a quarterback that is in the Heisman conversation, things tend to be good for you. And that's the case with the Oregon Ducks. Their first year in the Big Ten, coming from the Pac-12, it was a question of, can the Pac-12 translate to the Big Ten? The answer, by the way, no, unless it's the Oregon Ducks. That's what we've seen this year. But Dillon Gabriel has been phenomenal at quarterback. You look at what he's doing, over 3,200 passing yards, a touchdown-interception ratio that's amongst the top in the nation. And why it's so effective is because it's not just the quarterback. It's who the quarterback has to throw to. And you look at their top three receivers in terms of receptions for Oregon this year, and they all provide a lot of the same, but a lot of different. And you think of Tez Johnson, just came back from injury, automatically provided a spark in his first game back this past weekend for Oregon. Then you go a little bit further in Trayshawn Holden. Why I like Holden so much is he's 6'3", and that's going to pose an interesting matchup this weekend. And I know we'll talk about the opponent in Penn State a little later on. Tallest cornerback is A.J. Harris at 6'1", of the starting cornerbacks. So a 6'3" wide receiver, that's pretty good. And then you have Evan Stewart, again, another athletic playmaker for Oregon, and you've got a good tight end in Terrence Ferguson. They don't just have the quarterback. And we've seen a couple of times where the quarterback is good. The quarterback's in the Heisman candidate, but they don't have the weapons around them to provide a team to get over the top. Well, that's exactly what Dillon Gabriel has. He himself is good, but everyone is around him, or that's around him, is also good. I didn't even mention the running game yet. With Jordan James rushing for over 1,000 yards this year, he's got plenty of touchdowns, and they've got a good, duo with Noah Whittington in there as well. He's got a handful of touchdowns himself as a secondary back. This offense is just so dynamic in so many different places, and it starts with the quarterback. That's what you want for your offense. You want a quarterback that can start it out, and that's exactly what Dillon Gabriel can do. But he's more than just a game manager. He doesn't just get the ball out of his hands. He makes plays to his playmakers, and that's what makes this an offense that's averaging over 35 points a game and averaging 422 yards per game. This offense has so many pieces in so many areas. It makes them well too effective. And then obviously complementary football. You can't just have a good offense. You have to have a good defense, and it starts with the defensive line. Two guys up front that are massive in Jordan Burch as well as Derek Harden. I know you want to talk more about that front seven for Oregon.
Well, you can't talk about this Oregon Ducks team, which is a very scary team all around, both offensively and defensively, without talking about Jordan Burch, the defensive end, who hasn't even played the whole season for the Ducks. He's played 8 games, one of which he actually left early due to re-injuring himself. He didn't even play against Ohio State in the Ohio State win. So he's already got 8.5 sacks on the season without playing 4 games of the season. So he's scary in and of himself. He's 6'6", this massive guy who will be aiming to come for Drew Aller. I can promise you that much. And then behind him, you've got 3 linebackers who are instrumental to the way this defense works as well. You've got Mateo Uiagalelei. God, that name is going to give a lot of announcers a hard time. You've got Jeffrey Bossa as well, and to round it out, you've got Bryce Betcher. And those 3, Bryce Betcher is leading the 3 in tackles with 42, are a scary trio behind that defensive line as well. And like I said, it's going to be up to Penn State's offensive line, which is much smaller than most teams' offensive lines.
And a little banged up.
Yeah, with the loss of
Anthony Donko at
right tackle, the freshman who filled a big role this season as well. They're going to have to stop that pass rush, particularly from Burch, who I know in media has talked about how excited he is to go up against this Penn State team as well. And I think the most important part to Oregon's success this season has been their defensive backs, actually, particularly against weaker receivers on Penn State's side. You've got Jabbar Muhammad, who's leading that kind of defensive back group as well. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how they manage Penn State's weaker receivers, given that most of Penn State's offense does not come from the wide receivers.
Yeah, overall, this is an Oregon team that puts up a lot of points, and when they need to, they can stop their opponents from putting up a lot of points as well.
Under 16 points per game, about under 200 yards all-purpose for other teams. That's insane from their defense.
There's a high possibility that Penn State will have nightmares of the mascot formerly known as Puddles. But let's move over to that Penn State team, which is a team that...
Puddle of Tears.
That's a good one. There's a lot of people that I don't think expected Penn State to be here. A lot of people expected this to be an Ohio State-Oregon rematch. Ohio State lost to Michigan, allows for Penn State following their win against Maryland to slot in. How has Penn State gotten to this point, and realistically, what are the reasons that Penn State finds themselves in this game?
Look, Justin, I think you'll agree with me on these 2 points. Half of it, yes, is a stroke of luck. And I think a lot of people would say that the reason Penn State is in this championship game is partially a stroke of luck because Michigan somehow took down Ohio State. Gosh, there had to have been a lot of will on that team to somehow go from being a 6-5 team to take down the number 2 team in the country. But Penn State did its job against the teams that it was supposed to be. And that's why, in my opinion, this team is here. Yes, they played a couple close games that should have been maybe larger gaps between the points they scored and the team against Minnesota is an example of that, only won by 1 point, and USC as well. They took that game to overtime, but they were down 20-6 at halftime against USC, and they came back and won that game with multiple fourth down conversions on that last drive to send that game to Oregon or to overtime. And then the Minnesota game as well, they faked the punt. They came up with creative plays in that fourth quarter to win that game. So Penn State's done its job against the teams it's supposed to be. Now, Ohio State has some sort of mental hold on this Penn State team, I think, because they had every ingredient to beat that Ohio State team, and the 3-yard line is really Penn State's #1 enemy at this point in the season. But I think there are a lot of things to be really proud of from Penn State's perspective. Tyler Warren, I mean, gosh, what can you not say about Tyler Warren? He snapped the ball. He's run the ball. He's blocked. He's
caught
thrown the ball. He's caught the ball. Like he's done his job. He's done his job. He's done everything for this Penn State offense. And even when he's not the one with the ball, he's distracting other defenses because one man is not enough to mark him. They can't do it in zone and they can't do it in man-to-man coverage. So he's a distraction for the weaker receivers to maybe gain some more separation off those defensive backs. Now, I think the dual threat running back situation with Kaytron Allen, Nick Singleton, also going to be really crucial for Penn State. Again, the receivers are the weaker point. You've got a great defensive line. Abdul Carter has 10 sacks this season. You can't speak highly enough about this defense. Jalen really has stepped up in the defensive back position. But what are the receivers going to do?
I mean, what are the receivers going to do? But does that even matter, Josh? You asked a simple question. How did Penn State get here? This isn't baseball, but if there was a wins above replacement metric, Tyler Warren's leading the country. Penn State is a 3 or 4 loss team without Tyler Warren, and I confidently say that. Tyler Warren has done so much. You named everything he did. 81 receptions through the first 12 games for Penn State. Wide receiver room that you talked of. Take a guess. How many did they have combined?
Just over that amount.
87.
I know that.
6 more.
Yep.
6 more. Tyler Warren has been incredible. He's been the Penn State offense. He is the reason Penn State is in this game. Yeah, a little bit of luck thrown in there, or a lot of bit of luck thrown in there too. But this Penn State team knows what they have in Tyler Warren. They also know what they have in Drew Allard. I don't think what Drew Allard's done this season has been talked about enough. Sure, his touchdown-interception ratio isn't the 25-2 it was last year. It's 18-5. That's still incredibly good. Not as many passing yards at this current moment, 2,600 yards. But he's so much more confident. He's so much more poised in the pocket. He's so much more, relaxed in, getting Penn State through the game. That's why they made the comeback in USC. That's why they were able to make those plays in Minnesota. Josh, you had a firsthand look at that at Minnesota. That's why Penn State is where they are. Tyler Warren and Drew Allard. The rest of the offense is whatever. I'd argue your point on the running backs, and I will in our next talking point. But Penn State is here because of Tyler Warren. They're here because Drew Allard gave the ball to Tyler Warren. And you got to quickly mention the defense. You mentioned Abdul Carter. You mentioned some of the talent. The cornerbacks, A.J. Harris, Jalen Kimber, the 2 transfers from the SEC have come over. They've been great. But what about Jalen Reed and Zachy Wheatley, who've stepped up in the absence of an All-American safety in KJ Winston this entire season? That's been incredible, specifically Wheatley, because Wheatley's the one who's had the role increase a lot more. But this Penn State defense is the best second-half defense in the country. They're the best third-quarter defense in the country. That's why Penn State is in this game.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really seem to matter who you have as defensive coordinator, whether it's Manny Diaz or Tom Allen. Penn State's defense is going to be one of the best in the nation. You mentioned those games against Wisconsin and Minnesota. Minnesota's a team that already had a couple upsets earlier on in the season, and that's a Wisconsin team that Dan Lenning's Oregon Ducks squad struggled with on the road as well, and they had their starting quarterback in that game. But we'll move on to the big game. It is this Saturday, and with the big game comes predictions. Justin, I'm going to throw it to you first. Who do you have? Is it going to be the Ducks or is it going to be the Nittany Lions coming on top in Indianapolis?
Well, I wanted to keep it suspenseful. So on our little sheet beforehand, and I know I was told to make this pick quick. We're not making it quick. That's okay. I put Quack and I put Roar. I didn't know who to choose, or I just didn't want to let you guys know. I said I wanted to argue your running back point.
Yep.
Penn State's running game fails to show up in big games. This is another big game. If you look at Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen in Penn State's losses in their tenure, they have lost 7 games as a duo since they got here 3 years ago. They have not shown up. And when they do show up, it's one play or it's late in games. But
Those
losses,
are the 2 most important times that they have to show up in a
no,
game.
because they're all not they're blowouts early on in their tenure. Not this year, but they didn't show up this year against Ohio State. Tyler Warren outrushed the both of them against Ohio State this year. Penn State needs to find success on the ground. That is going to be tough to do against Oregon. We talked about the front 7. That's why I raised the argument against you. But that's where they need to start Penn State. Drew Aller and Tyler Warren can be incredible. But Tyler Warren's going to be covered, if not double covered, against Oregon on Saturday, and we know that. So this comes down to what can Penn State do in the running game. We talked about it. It's going to be tough for them to do. I have this Oregon team outlasting Penn State by a couple of points. Look, they have 7 common opponents this season. The common opponents would tell you Penn State wins, because Penn State's actually outscored the 7 common opponents, despite a 7-point loss to Ohio State, mind you. 143, Penn State outscored them. 138, Oregon outscored them. Penn State is going to lose this game by, I would say, about 10 points. Oregon is just too good, too well-rounded, and I think Penn State, the slow start, we haven't even mentioned the slow start. We could go on for hours about that.
Right,
the slow start is going to come back and haunt them.
Okay, I agree with you that I think Oregon is going to win this game, but I don't think it's going to be by 10 points. I think it's by, at max, a touchdown. Because I think Penn State actually matches up against the Oregon Ducks pretty well. And Penn State's also really hungry. They've outscored opponents.
I'm also hungry.
Okay.
I didn't eat dinner.
They've outscored opponents 154-48 since that loss to Ohio State. And I think they've cleaned up a lot of aspects of their game since that loss as well. So I think this game is going to come down to 2 battles. I think it's going to come down to a battle in the trenches between Penn State's O-line and Oregon's D-line and how much they can protect Drew Aller to give him time to complete those passes. And I think it's also going to come down to a battle in those D-backs and Penn State's wide receivers. Can Penn State outrun Oregon's defensive backs? And I think the answer to that is no. And I think that's where Oregon's going to win this game.
Well, I'm going to tell you both one thing. I just hope both teams have fun. It's going to be a great game. You know, one of the best offenses in the nation will go up against a defense that has been just as good throughout the 2024 campaign. Will the Ducks finish 13-0 and get a first-round bye in the college football playoff? Or will Penn State continue to make noise by winning its first Big Ten title in 8 years? It'll all come to fruition Saturday night at Lucas Oil Stadium. But until then, that's all the time we have tonight on Penn State Sports Night. For Cailey, Thalman, and Justin Ciavolella, I'm Josh Bartosik, saying so long and enjoy the rest of your night.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to this edition of Penn State Sports Night.
For more content like this and so much more, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and X. For everyone here at Penn State Sports Night,
We are
Penn State Sports Night.